Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So today we're doing a special episode. This is a trial for what we're going to do here for Awaken Your Inner Genius on Tuesday nights. We call this extra. And we did it simply because it was called for a couple of weeks ago from many of you that heard my story. And for others, there was quite a group that time. And so what we found is that we wanted to try it again. And so in March, that's what we're doing, is we're going to have a chance to be able to do that and broadcast. And tonight I'm starting it off. So I wanted to start off here with what is called and known as a kintsugi bowl. This is a Japanese pottery bowl. And what's very, very fascinating about this, I learned of this just a few months ago, and it was so touching to my heart because it is the Japanese art of broken pottery that is then sealed with gold. And it symbolizes resilience and it symbolizes the beauty of imperfection. And when I first heard about the kintsugi bowl, I went and found one for myself so I could set it on my living room and have it there. And I was very, very touched by the fact that there is very great power in the beauty of imperfection. This is something I've personally been learning. And it was relevant for our conversation tonight because tonight my goal is to share with you just a overview of Walter and Leo's life. And I have one goal here this evening. I am on my own for the broadcast, so I see there are several of you. I'm trying to figure out how I can find your chat. So give me just a moment here as I'm learning all of this. I cannot see the chat box yet, so please forgive me. I'm going to stay focused on what I'm doing since this is my first time doing this. So I wanted to show the power of Walter and Leo's human life, because many times when people come in, they see all that they've done. They see this beautiful museum, and I've had enough tours here at the Russell Museum in Waynesboro, Virginia, that people walk in and they become a little intimidated and say, wow, this is what one man did. And what I wanted to spend time to tonight is to show you that the power of what one couple did, but they also had ups and downs just like we do. And they never were meant to be idolized. I don't believe that's what many illuminates and many people who have the light and have greater knowledge of the light, I don't believe that they ever meant for people to idolize them. I believe that they meant to show us a path. And when you look at the fact that we're on our human journey and we're on this journey to be able to connect cosmically, okay, then we pause for just a moment and say, wow. And so our new format here, a couple of thoughts for you as we go into the conversation. So I'll have a couple of clips for you. I've got some neat things to share with you tonight. It's going to be a more casual conversation. I chuckled when I listened to the broadcast from this past Sunday night, and I was talking way too fast because we're always under this pressure, time pressure. And what we decided to do with our Tuesday night broadcast is just go wherever the energy takes us, to be a little more laid back and simply step into the energy of where those subjects are taking us. And so you will see the lineup for the panel over the next 5 weeks, and everyone's really excited about doing what it is that they want to do. So tonight, I wanted you to see the human journey and relate to it on your own. And I wanted to share with you how this happened and why I'm the one who is sitting here showing you this here today. And what I learned is I walked into the museum in August, it'll be 4 years ago. And I walked in and I asked them if we could do a 3-day program. We called it the Russell Experience. And I want to take you to a section right here. We'll be sure to link this so that you can enjoy it later. But I want you to pay close attention. I invite you to pay close attention to this page, because what you're going to see is a lot of people on the floor. And we did a timeline exercise, which is what I'm going to take you through tonight. Okay. And what we did is we took a look at their life, and it was very, very powerful to be able to do that. And I'd like you to just take a look at that, please. And I want to show you how timelines are so important for us as individuals. And so I'm going to step over here to the wall. So this is a copy of the timeline that we actually had. And in my corporate work, I've done a lot with timelines. And for those of you that are new, I would like to invite you to even do something like this for yourself. You can simply get a couple of 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. You put a line through the middle, and you put the years from when you were born and all the way to the years past, many, many years past of where you are today. And when you do the timeline personally, I found there was great power. I would encourage people, to place all the things that happen when you're doing a personal timeline. I would put the things you considered challenging in the bottom, the things you considered exciting and happy on top. And then you're going to sketch out your life and you begin to see a story that emerges. This has been such a powerful technique that I use in corporate that I brought it over here to what we did with the Russells. Now, I'll show you what I did a little bit differently for them. But this was a labor of love. So when I came into this museum, I'd never heard of Walter and Lao Russell, and I so deeply wanted to learn about them. And here's what I did. When I offered this to them, I dove in. There's a book, Remembered for Love, that was written about Lao, and A Worthy Messenger that was written about Walter. And so as I was preparing for this particular Russell experience, some of you have actually been a part of that, I spent quite a bit of time pulling together this timeline. And the reason it was so important, I wanted to honor their journey. I wasn't trying to idolize. I was seeking to understand. And I was seeking I was so curious about how did this man and this woman who were here on this earthly journey, how did they create what they did? And so I mapped it out. I spent hours and hours and hours. And so that's what you're going to see tonight is the countless. I have a close up so you'll be able to see it. So worry not. But I wanted you to see the big timeline first, because what I did is I started here from the 1800s, okay, where and underneath the bottom, I put Walter in red for the masculine, and that was his journey. I put Leo where she started in blue for the feminine and her journey. Their journey together, I put in purple, okay? And then once she was alone again after Walter refolded, I put her back in blue, and then the rest of it is the actual history of the organization. Now, the reason I wanted to explain this to you is I'd like to take you through the timeline. Hello, dear ones. I'm so happy to see you all. I can actually see some of your names. I'm so proud of myself. Hi, Terry. Hi, Linda, D, Karen. I'm so proud of myself. I'm actually running the behind the scenes tech. And I'm by myself, so I won't have to manage lots of beautiful opinions tonight. Not that I'm saying that's ever a challenge. Shh, don't tell them I said that, okay? So tonight, I wanted to just simply give this gift to you and have you hear what their life was like and see where it mirrors your own, okay? See where it mirrors your own. Because when you dive into the timeline, and one of the most important things that came out is the fact that they said, wow, they faced some of the very same things that we did. They didn't have a perfect life, my new friends. They did not have a perfect life. Hello, Miss Sarah. What they had was an incredible life that was very, very, very intense. Now, I want to say up front, I am only, like I said, in August will be 4 years. I am a relatively new student compared to the ones that have had 50 years. I never met Leo and Walter Russell, that were founders of the University of Science and Philosophy. I am simply a human that walked through the doors and was so inspired and touched. I was touched because I remember looking at all the sculptures and learning that he didn't even learn to start sculpting until he was 56 years old. And I was 53 at the time that I walked in. And I remember thinking, wow, there's still hope, right? And so the gift that I'm about to go over with you is simply take a look at their human journey. Feel free to ask questions in the chat box. I will try to get better at bringing this along, but I'm going to zoom in and quickly go through the timeline. And I'd like to give each one of them a bit of the journey. And then I'll be looking at your questions. And then I have some summaries for at the end. Now, please know that our Tuesday night extra bonus sessions for Awaken Your Inner Genius, we don't have any preconceived notion of how short or long it will be. We're simply going to follow the energy. So before I begin, if you'll just close your eyes and breathe in with me and simply relax into your body and worry less about learning about their timeline and more about inviting in what it is that's meant for you to take away this evening. What are you meant to take away? And as you breathe in and out, I'd like you to become very centered in your heart. Feel the love. Feel the love for the universe. Feel the love for humanity. Feel the gratitude simply for a loving couple who shared great light, so that we may benefit from it all these years later. And when you're ready, feel free to open your eyes. All right, so let's dive in, shall we? I'm going to zoom in close here. Okay, zoom in close. So let's talk about here. So Walter was born in 1871, born in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, do understand a lot of his work is in the book, The Man Who Tapped. Now, he had his first illumination in 1878. Now, what he talks about in The Man Who Tapped, okay, is that he had had illuminations ever since about every 7 years from the time he was 7 years old. And you're going to actually see that in the timeline. So the big grand illumination that you hear us talk about happened in 1921, but there was a lot that happened before then. So when you look back retroactively, you might even consider that perhaps you have had some illuminations yourself along the way. Now, he left school when he was 9 years old, and he was influenced, okay, by a blind musician named Mr. Maynard. There's a lovely story, so I'm not going to share all the details about the story. It is quite fabulous. If you haven't read The Man Who Tapped, then you are certainly going to want to. If someone could give me just a thumbs up that you can hear me okay, I would be most grateful. Now, as we move on with his life, I captured just a few things here in his world. What happened is that he actually had a second illumination at 14. And then he actually contracted diphtheria and actually died there at 14. And that story is also mentioned. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Judy, Linda, Carrie. I so appreciate you all. I feel like I'm having a little party with my friends here this evening. Now, he actually had an experience there, and you can certainly read more about it. I'm going to keep it light here for tonight. But he was baptized at 15. At 15, he was baptized at a local Baptist church. So let's pause for just a minute. He has roots in the Baptist world. And so a lot of people don't understand that, but that's an important thing for us to remember. Now, he entered the Massachusetts Art School when he was 16, okay? Now, what's important to remember, I want to zoom back here, is that he, had no real formal schooling except for the art schooling, because he left school at 9 years old. Perhaps some of you can relate. He needed to go and help his family. So this was a man with a fourth grade education. And so that makes the story all the more remarkable, because he talks about how God was in fact his teacher. Now, as we go through this, all right, he entered the Massachusetts Art School. And as we go through this, he continued to live his life. He moved to Boston when he was 21. So please note when you see the dates and the time and the year, that's how old he was. He did study art for 4 years, and then he went for 3 months abroad. At the age of 20, he had his first art commission, okay? And then you will see that he was actually, during that time, covering the Spanish-American War battle for Cuba. So if you ever come to the Walter Russell Museum, the Russell Museum here in Waynesboro, Virginia, you will see some of the drawings from when he was actually there doing the wartime drawings. So I'm going to keep going because there's a lot to cover. Now, this is really, really important. So he was married before Leo. Married at 23, and that was his first wife. And around that age, I want to zoom down here, around that age, he actually joined something called the Twilight Club. And notice who the other members of the Twilight Club were: Ralph Waldo Emerson, Mark Twain, Walt Whitman, Calvin Coolidge, Andrew Carnegie, and the list goes on. Now, we won't get all into the Twilight Club here today. We can certainly ask John Bonzel when he's talking about the lectures of Walter Russell next week. But what's important about the Twilight Club is that they came together so that they could enhance the character of humanity. And those were the kind of conversations they had. So instead of playing bunco and instead of having just casual conversation about social media and Netflix, what these folks were doing, the very names that we studied in school were coming together with what was called the Twilight Club. If you want to learn more about that, there's a lot in the museum. Just let us know. Remember, tonight is an overview. Now, when we go into what's going on with him, so he was living in New York City. He lived in New York City for for at least 5 years, and he did have a daughter named Helen. Okay, and between 1897 and 1898, he became the art editor of Collier's Weekly and became a correspondent during the Spanish War. So this is important to know that this was a big part of his early beginnings. Now, if you ever have a chance to come into the museum, they have wonderful tour guides here. You can get much more detail. What's important here is not only his journey, but then how it intersected with Leo and even the bigger story. So just bear with me, okay? Send me some love here as I do this. I'm shaking in my boots, hoping I honor it in the way that I want to so dearly. Now, what's interesting is we want to go back to the 1900s here. Okay, so I'm going here to 1900. He had a second daughter, okay, Louise, when he was 29. And when he was 29, he had his first painting, The Might of Ages. The Might of Ages. Now, that is a remarkable painting. You've heard us talk about that before, and I will certainly have a chance to be able to put a link to the Might of Ages image on the philosophy.org website. But he wasn't recognized in the U.S. yet. So what's important about that story is he was not recognized until later over there internationally, and that was actually the start of how he began to have international acclaim. Now, let's continue. Now, when you think about it, let's go back to the 1900s, okay? Because we're about to walk into the time. Let me bring this down just a little bit. Lao Russell was born in 1904. Now, note that she was born as Daisy Grace Cook. She does not have her name changed until later in her life. So there she was, 1904. By this point, Walter Russell had already been married, had 2 children, and then all of a sudden, Leo enters the planet, right? Very fascinating. So while that was happening, Walter, when he was at 32, was commissioned by the Ladies' Home Journal to do the 12 most beautiful children in America. If you come to the Russell Museum, you'll actually have a chance to see that rendition, and they're beautiful. Literally, the drawings are so detailed, it's amazing that they actually are photography. Truly remarkable. So he began to have a claim over this idea of how well he was able to do portraits. Now, let's keep going. So remember, he was growing by leaps and bounds at this point. He also became a horse breeder at 34. Now, this is 1905. Let's continue. He started doing architectural journey between 1901 and 1917. So this is an important part of the story for those of you that didn't know it. What was intriguing about Russell is that he actually designed $20 million worth of buildings in New York City. So when you begin to be more interested in this story, not only was he by that point doing paintings and drawings, a correspondent for the war, he was already a horse breeder. He by that point had an understanding of his God awareness, and so he was growing by leaps and bounds. And back then, he actually entered into architecture. There's a lot that you can learn about him as architecture. So as I share a very high level of this story, write things down that you want to know more about, because I promise you there's no way I could cover it all. But here is an important part of the story. In 1907, he declared bankruptcy. Okay, he declared bankruptcy. Now, when we think about this, this is important to understand, because remember, Walter and Leo also had their own successes, their own failures, their own challenges in life. And so when we learn about both of them, they had success, they had marriages, they had other things that happened in their life. He declared bankruptcy. And I will never forget when I had students actually see that. They were like, oh my goodness, for the first time, I actually relate to what Walter said. And wow. He actually had some failures like me, and all of a sudden it makes them more human, because they too had to traverse this human journey in this 3D reality, and it wasn't always easy. So let us continue, shall we? Now, as we're going through this, okay, he's designing He's designing in 1908, designing in 1903. So in his late 30s, he's busy designing. And then in 1914, okay, very important to understand that what he started doing, and this was at 43, that he made a significant change. He ceased painting children and started painting notable figures. And it was also while he was in his 40s that he did horse breeding and figure skating. So can we pause for just a moment? Because in this reality, how often do we actually say, oh, well, we're done by a certain age? Part of what I love about the story is that they weren't done by a certain age. Okay. They weren't done. He was reinventing himself all along the way. And how powerful is that? Is it not? Well, let's take a look, shall we? The story continues. Now, at this point in time, I'm going to show you that there were things happening both in Walter and Leo's life. All right, Walter and Leo's life. So let me pause for just a moment and come over here. So as we're going through here, I want to just pause here. See, this is 1920, okay, 1920. And as we're inching here, all of a sudden, okay, he ceased painting, and at the same time, this is when Leo's life started to make a dramatic change in her world. Important to know that because these lives began to live in a parallel fashion. And very powerful when you hear Walter actually refer to in the home study course how he was very aware of her birth and very aware of her energy in the world. Let us continue, shall we? All right. So here we go. So let's pause for a moment and let's talk about Leo, shall we? Let's talk about Leo. You know what? Before we do that, I want to have you tune into Walter's voice. Tune into Walter's voice. So I pulled a snippet from his lectures, and it's just a short snippet. I'm going to play just around 30 to 40 seconds of it, and I invite you to simply tune into his energy. If you are called and interested in this work, there is a reason. So I felt it was important that you will hear both Walter and Leo's voice. So tune in and see what Walter had to say. Most importantly, tune into his energy.
The giving to one's creation that which they have in themselves, they can give no more than that, because no one can give more of himself than he has to give. And the greater his God awareness, the greater he can give that to his children. And the greater a community like this unfolds in its spiritual awareness, and a community manifests the equality of father-motherhood that makes balanced mates and makes a balanced home.
All right. So I just picked a clip for just a minute and wanted to just have you pause for a moment and tune in to Walter's voice. So next week, John will be sharing some of Walter's lectures, and you will have a chance to hear a lot of what Walter had to say. But this was a man who actually, think about this, before he met Leo, this is a very different world. Go back to the 1920s, really important for us to understand. I'm going to keep this going because there's so much more to cover. Truly remarkable lives. Please give me a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. Let me know if you have any questions as we go along. So let's pause for a moment and talk about what was happening with Leo, okay? So when Leo was 12, when Leo was 12, her mother died of a heart attack. When Leo was 13, her father died of cancer. So this is an important part of the story because this was a woman who understands significant loss early in her life. And she was, in fact, raised by her older sister. There's a lot more. All of the details around Leo's life is in this book, Remembered for Love. I'm simply pulling out a few nuggets that were on the timeline. But it's important to know that she understood the heartbreak of loss. That is a tender age. I remember, join me in remembering what life was like when you were 13. Perhaps some of you dealt with a loss at those preteen years as well. that was a very difficult time. Okay. So in the book, it talks a lot about what happened with her and what happened, how it changed the course of the direction of her life. And know that that was going on about the same time, okay, that Walter Russell had some other things happening. So as that was happening in her life, Walter Russell, it was the last meeting of the Twilight Club. Walter Russell, this was 1918. It evolved to the Society for Arts and Sciences. Okay, very, very important. So much history around the Twilight Club. Now, at this point, know that, now remember the blue here is Leo. She graduated from her schooling at 15. Now, this is 1920 that she graduated. We are beginning to inch to the very important time, very important time. So right before around this 1919, Walter actually was responsible for introducing cooperative building concepts in New York City. That was actually tied to the 1923 National Rent Relief Project. So what's important to understand with what his life was about is he was influencing society because he had no doubt that he could influence society. I think it's remarkable when we go back and we look at lives before the Social Security Act. I think that's one of the worst things that ever happened to society. Don't throw anything at me, I'll explain it. But back then, they never thought about the fact that they couldn't influence. This smallness was not seeped into the culture. And so there he was, influencing art, influencing architecture, influencing what was happening, even in something like the cooperative building concept. So you ever heard of a co-op? Well, we have Walter Russell to thank for that. Now, we're inching to the really, really important thing. This is 1921. So let me come on over here to this thing. So right here, you can see, okay, right here, 1921 is when he had that grand illumination. What they refer to the fact that he was in this illumination for 39 days in a conversation with his creator, being shown all of the things that we've been talking about in the home study course, which then became a lifelong journey. This is a pivotal point, okay? So 1921, I'd like you to jot down in the chat box, 1921. You want to remember that because that's where things began to really change. Now, when you go to this, okay, so happy to see you all, and thank you very much for the thumbs up. Right after, one of the very first paintings that he did is the octave wave. And that is this painting that's right here, and there's another wave as well. But that's when he wrote the octave wave. That's when he came back from his illumination, trying to capture all of these things that he was shown. You want to talk about powerful. You heard me just a few weeks ago about how rattled I was with just a little mini illumination with so much information coming in. It blows my mind when I think about, wow, what in the world happened to him, and how he actually, when he came back from that time period, that is when he was actually, during his illumination, when he was given the words, he said, from the creator, and wrote the Divine Iliad. Okay. So remember, there's so much that I could share with you, but we're going to keep it focused. Now, what happened is that Walter was doing a lot of really important things. He spent 5 years, and this is when he was publishing. He wanted to publish the Universal One, okay? And his daughter actually helped him edit this book. Now, what is the Universal One? I believe I have it here. You know what? Can you believe I don't have a copy in the office? All right, forgive me. I tried. I got my books all over the office here. But this was the signature book that he sent out. It's the blue book that you hear us refer to often. And he sent it to hundreds and hundreds of all leaders, scientists all around the world. And the only one that he heard back from was Nikola Tesla, who said, lock this up for 1,000 years until mankind is ready. Wow. Okay. So, and what's interesting is the story goes is that he actually heard from the Catholic Church not too long after he published it and was told to never publish it again. And he did not while he was alive. I'll show you on the timeline why it was republished. Okay. So let's continue. So what was happening here is that he had a lot of things going on. Up here, in the meantime, let me go to what's happening with Leo. This is really important. So what happened was Leo was 22. She actually made a name for herself in beauty mail order products. How fabulous is that? She was born in England. And so while Walter was busy making a name for himself in America, Leo, who was Daisy at the time, was actually briefly employed by the Rothschild as an assistant, but she was busy making a name for herself. And she also got married to a gentleman at 24. So at this point, remember that both of them had been married before. That often isn't brought up in part of the story. And when I had people do the timeline, they were like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And doesn't that make it a little bit more relatable for some of us that go, oh, okay, amazing how things change. Well, let's continue, because while she's creating a mail order beauty product, I mean, think about this. This was back in 1927. So she was an entrepreneur. This was part of what just delighted me about the story. She was an entrepreneur before her time. I mean, this was a woman who had ambition and wanted to make a difference and uplift people even back then. So in the 1920s, I have to hand it to her. What a fabulous part of the story. Now, as she had those things going on, Walter's got all kinds of things happening in his life. He's taking up sculpting. Okay, he did his first work as the bust of Thomas Edison. He is doing architectural design in Florida. That was at 55. At 56, he becomes president, okay, for the arts and sciences, which led to national notoriety. And then here's a very fascinating part of the story. Okay. So the Westinghouse Lamp Company provided Walter Russell with full use of its facilities for gas transmutations, including their spectrum analysis. All right, that's fancy work, and let me show you what that was about. One of the most famous books that was written about Walter Russell is this one here. It's called In the Wave Lies the Secret of Creation. This is one of my favorite ones. You see my name on it. I'm like, don't touch my books. I love this one because before they published the home study course with the colorful charts, this was one of the only places you could get it. Well, I want to read to you the back of it because this is really, really a fascinating part of the story. And it says this: Walter Russell spent the first half of his life as a world-class portrait, architect, author, composer, sculptor, and philosopher. In 1926, with the publication of his periodic charts in the Universal One. So let me pause for a moment. This is what they're talking about, okay? This is what they're talking about, this particular image. I feel like I'm playing show and tell from when I was a child, right? So he said he predicted the existence of two elements, as well as the trends, as well as elements of plutonium and neptunium. Forgive me. By 1927, this is what's talking about the Westinghouse. He had transmuted water into 17 different substances at the Westinghouse Lamp Laboratory. His science writings and work earned him a doctor's degree of science from the American Academy of Sciences in 1941. A man with a fourth grade education was awarded a doctor's degree of science. Now, this is an incredible part of the story, my new friends here, because he had knowledge and they truly could not even understand what was happening there. A lot more to be said about that story. But when you think, wow, transmutation, how do they do it? Something powerful happened for a man with a fourth grade education. Let us not forget that. The only schooling he had then was the art education, fourth grade education. So when I learned this part of the story, I was like, oh, wow, please tell me more. Let us continue. All right. Now, what's interesting is that he actually published his periodic table of elements. And so he had a lot of things happening right here. While that was going on, remember, Leah was only 28. Problems were arising in her marriage. And so she wanted to come to America in 1933. So while Walter's got all this going on, she begins her entree into coming into America, wanting to expand her business. Now, understand that by the time she was 30, she split ways with her husband. Okay. Now, let's just go back down here. So here is something that Walter is going on. He's got all kinds of things that are happening. He actually, by this point, he's doing lectures. He's doing lectures at the IBM. Okay. And he was doing all kind of principles of success. There's a book called Think that you can learn more about his lectures. At that point in time, There he is working with the IBM founder. This was pretty important part of helping Walter get better with financial survival. Now, this is a funny part of the story. When I hear them talk about the tour, they talk about how Walter Russell could go through money like it was water. So hello, Soul Paradise Dear. Hello, Joy. Hello, Gina. He could go through money like water. So that was not, when you think about if you've ever struggled with the 3D world, be mindful that perhaps he did as well. Really important part of the story. Now, lots of things happened, and please know that we're going to end up having this on our website. We'll be sure to post this. But he ended up doing lots of other sculptures. Okay, he was commissioned for the Mark Twain Memorial, which again, all of these images. If you go to philosophy.org, you can see all these images of all these artwork. You can see more of the timeline. You can see the images that are actually in the museum. So I encourage you to check that out. Now, here's what's interesting. This is a little interesting tidbit. So the date is unknown, but legend has it that Nikola Tesla and Walter Russell, they met and discussed his cosmology. And the estimate is that it happened somewhere between 1921 and 1943. Russell himself evidently exerted considerable energy for years, urging the research labs of Union Carbide, Westinghouse, General Electric, and others to verify his atomic findings. Remember that most geniuses are not recognized in the years that they're actually doing the work because it goes against the norm. Okay, it goes against the norm. So this was pretty much a big deal. He's trying to get the word out. Or imagine he's trying to tell you, oh, by the way, all the stuff you've learned isn't quite how it is. Oh, why don't you take a look at what it is that I've done, right? Now, what's happening at this time? We're inching to the fun stuff. Let's just go ahead and go back to Leo. So when Leo, right there at 32, she ended up coming back to America and was eventually divorced. She had some troubles with some investigations because back then the FTC was giving some troubles to anybody who was out there doing products. She traveled globally from the time that she was 33. She traveled to Paris, to Italy. And this is important because she ended up having a great appreciation for the spiritual practices around the world. One of the lovely parts for me personally with the home study course is the fact that it recognizes a lot of different belief systems. And I found that incredibly powerful because, as I mentioned to you, I was brought up in the Southern Baptist faith. I found it when I was later in my teens. This was my Bible from when I was a Southern Baptist woman. And if you were to look at it, you would see all of the highlights, all of the things, all of the studying. I mean, I want you to know that I spent a great deal of my life. I don't even have a back cover because I used this so much. And so as you are navigating your way from wherever your journey is, as I expanded from this belief and started to learn other beliefs, I was so dismayed myself personally about how everybody said you had to believe my way and everybody else was wrong. Okay, does that resonate with anybody? And so I've had a deep appreciation for the way Walter and Leo integrated. In fact, one of the great stories about Walter is he had his Bhagavad Gita copy in his pocket, and he said he wouldn't take $1 million for it. So part of where this comes from is Leo's world travelers. So world travel, so much more I could say about that. Now, by this point, okay, she's 35. She's spending some time in Florida, Boston. She becomes a permanent resident of the U.S. when she is 36. Do you know that in 1943, she had a brief time trying to be an actress in Hollywood? There's some fun pictures about that. I do want to mention to you, for those of you who are history buffs, there is a fabulous book available on their website, and it's called Swannanoa Palace, and it does a masterful job. I want to just show you. It does a masterful job of actually showing some of the things about Walter and Leo. So I didn't have that zoomed out enough, but this does give a lot of history. And for those of you who are really history buffs, you might find this fascinating. All kinds of color pictures of their life, of their journey. To me, this is one of my most cherished books, and it's really, really fun. So I want to mention that to you for those of you that love history. Now, we're inching up to the good stuff. All right. Let me get to a couple of things. Now, at this point in the 1940s, okay, we've got Walter is moved into his Carnegie Hall studio. He was estranged from his wife. So here you have, when you learn about these things, don't be intimidated. They had their own issues. This was their own human journey. Okay. Now, at that point, this is what I was talking about, is that the American Academy of Sciences actually confers a doctorate to Walter Russell. So that wasn't until he was, drum roll please, he was 70 years old. 70 years old. So can we pause for a moment? That is a long time to be working and then finally have some recognition. So don't worry if you haven't reached all of that yet. Your best years may still be ahead of you. So let me pause for just a moment so I can see some of the comments that are happening there in the chat box. So I say the comments. Hello, dear Bruno. I do not know how to show your comments on screen, so I'm going to have to learn how to do that next time. So you all having a good time? Just let me know. And part of what is inspiring about this timeline is that he hasn't even met Leo yet. I mean, he hasn't even met Leo yet. Can we just say that for a moment? So let's go. Let's keep going. So at this point in time, at this point in time, she's deciding what she's going to do. She actually moves back to New York City when she is 37. All right. He's doing his thing. He's working on sculptures of Franklin D. Roosevelt. He had a heart attack when he was 73. He still hasn't met Leo yet. All right. So let's just say he hasn't met Leo yet. He had a heart attack. So there he was facing his own health issues. Now, he completed something called the Four Freedom sculpture. I really wish I had a multi-dimensional, a multi-tiered, I could show you all these pictures at the same time, but it is just too much of importance. All right, here comes the important stuff. Wow, wow, wow. This is really, really fun. So we go to the purple on April 6, 1946. Walter and Leo, Walter talked with Leo for the first time. Notice the age difference. Walter was 76, Leo was 41. Scandalous, don't you think? So I had to chuckle because when I walked into the museum, I was married to an older gentleman as well. He was 27 years older than me. They had a 33-year difference. And I know all of the comments and the looks and the assumptions at the time about what people say about those kind of age differences. So I was intrigued by the fact that there was such an age difference with these two. So this is when they first met. And I thought it would be fun for you to hear. If you have not already heard, if you have, just tune into the vibration of what Leo has to say. But I thought it would be fun for you to hear from her in her own voice of how she and Doc met. So sit back and tune into the vibration.
How Doctor and I met, so that you know how it is that nothing happens by chance.
And the greatest secret...
You know the little book, The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe by Glenn Clark, was given to me in March of 1946. And I'll tell you, would you like to know how we met? Well, someone gave me this little book, and I read it, and I knew deep inside me that Walter Russell was waiting for me to call him. Now that may sound strange to you, although you must have had experiences yourself that you couldn't believe, but that is actually what happened to me. So after reading the book through 3 times, I telephoned him to New York. I didn't know what I was going to say. I had never called anybody in my life before in this way, and all I said to him, you know, I've just finished this little book about you, and I find myself expressed for the first time in my life. I would very much like to see you. And he said, well, I would very much like to see you. He said, there's something in your voice that I recognize. I have heard it within me for years. Can I see you tomorrow? And I laughed and I said, why no, I'm in Boston. Boston. And he said, well, if you're in Boston, you don't have to come to New York to see me. I'm coming to Boston to see you. And he came. And that is how we came together, and we have worked together as one ever since. So that's how fate unfolds, how destiny unfolds.
Isn't that delightful? Isn't that delightful? Now, I want to show you this little book because this is what was handed to her. So many times when you speak to people who have become fascinated with what Walter and Lao Russell have done, is the on-ramp is this little book. So it's not the 12-unit home study course, it's this little book. So I want to put this in perspective. Little bitty book. You can carry these with you. You can give these to Uber drivers. You can put them in stocking stuffers. It's a nice, easy way to just simply say, hey, there's something beautiful in here. And when I was doing my research for the timeline and for the Russell experience, I actually talked to one of the previous board members who actually knew Lao and spent quite a bit of time with her. And he shared with me that Lao said that there's a great deal of very important energy contained within the book. So this as an on-ramp, you don't even have to talk about the home study course. This is an on-ramp. You will hear, in fact, in a few weeks, you're going to hear Ken's personal story about how finding this book played a dramatic role in his recovery journey. And he's been recovered now from addictionism for 34 years. He has an incredible story, and that's going to be in just a few weeks. But this little book, so when she shares this story, this is where it all begins. So let me go back to the timeline here. This is, okay, so what we've gotten, all Walter's lived all these years, Lao is now, and so they meet, he's 76 and she is 41. 76 and 41, important things coming from this story. And so from that point on, look at all of this purple. There was so much that they created here at this point in time that I won't even be able to go into all the detail. I'm going to pick out some important things. But I do want to bring up something really, really important. So they meet in 1946, 1 year after the atom was dropped. So go back with me, please, for that moment in society where this humanity had just lived through one of the most horrific things that had ever happened. And they meet shortly thereafter. There was uncertainty, there was turmoil, people were searching for answers. So this idea of the fact that you see this big dotted line here, this is right here is when that atomic bomb was dropped. And so the reason this is so very important is that their union, okay, as the story continues, and I'll talk about her changing her name and how they got married, but they created, I wanted you to see how much they created. This is so powerful. They created, my new friends, such important container of love. And I believe when I have another timeline that I've done for the United States, and you can see where things really started to go awry with what happened with our country in the 1940s. That's a conversation for another day. But when I actually put these two timelines right beside each other, it became so evident to me, Kimberly Faith, that they were anchoring the love on this planet at a time when humanity was sinking. So when you're reading the work and you are tapping into these books and you're even sharing and on your own personal journey of increasing your cosmic awareness, your God awareness, know that you are tapping into seeds that were planted at a very important time in humanity. Because what was going on between the 1940s and 1955, between that time, those were important things. Go back and look when the CDC opened. Go back and look when Operation Paperclip happened. Go back and look at a lot of things that happened between the early 1940s and the 1950s. And so can we just pause for a moment and have gratitude that these two came together to anchor the love that we are still riding that wave? It touches my heart in such a profound way. Such a profound way. And so please understand, when I walked in here, I'm going to go back to the timeline in just a minute. But when I walked in here, I had never heard of Walter and Lao Russell. I had no idea these two even existed. And to find this beautiful story of history and of architecture and of of art, of philosophy, of science, of spirituality. It was like walking into a magical treasure chest. I absolutely fell in love, literally. And I started a drive every single month from South Carolina, 6 hours to come up here and spend a week just to be here in the environment. And so, even this awaken, okay, I'm going to get back to the timeline, I promise you, even this whole awaken your inner genius, this is an expression of that love. We're riding on their love wave. You are right here with me, riding on the love wave that Ken and I birthed right here through the awaken your inner genius. So never underestimate what can happen with the decisions that we make, because we just don't know how it will unfold. So hang with me. Let's go ahead and back to the timeline. So what's really, really interesting, this is a delightful part of the story, is that when Walter and Leo first met, by the way, they had to be properly chaperoned. They had to be properly chaperoned. So very, very intriguing. And so what happens is that they started to work together. Leo ends up moving very quickly, okay? Moves to New York City to help Walter. She moved next to his Carnegie Hall studios. Leo, now here's another important part of it, okay? Leo by that point was actually traveling around the country with Walter. She saw that there was a lot to be done with the work, and she just jumped in. And her heart and soul, she knew this had really important meaning and significance for humanity. And so she started to tour the country. And as they began to work together, right up to the point before they got married, that's when she actually changed her name from Daisy to Leo. And that was from being inspired from Lao Tzu. But here's what I want you to know, is that Leo actually was very successful from England, and she was the one who partially paid for his Carnegie Hall studio. So this is an independent woman who I want to pause for a moment here, because, during a time when women weren't necessarily considered equal, she and Walter came together and he treated her very equal from the very, very beginning. I love all the comments that are on the chat box. Keep it up, and have you all please keep commenting. I'm sorry, I don't know how to do that yet. I will learn that by next week. I have no other team. It's just me tonight. So she used her resources from England to be able to support Walter's work. And what's really fascinating is they worked together for 15 years. I'm going to show you this. And her journey continued for 25 years after. This is the devotion of a woman who wanted to change the world. So we hear a lot about Walter. We see a lot about Walter, but her impact, her significance cannot be underestimated. Let us continue. So what happened is that they actually, she was working with Walter in 1947 to make his message have a broader appeal. Walter was too technical. And she even went back and edited the Divine Iliad because she felt like it had too many mistakes. So she had quite a bit of charm there. Now, let's go to when things really happened, all right? They decided by July 29th, 1948, they decided to get married. And what Walter said, this is actually quoted in the book that I just showed you about Swannanoa, that Leo rescued me and the message. So 1948, that quote comes from this book. 1948, they said, you know what, we're doing this. Now, this was not easy. There's tons of things in the archives. This hit the New York papers. There was quite a bit of hoopla because by that point, he and his wife were split up. Here he is marrying a younger woman. Just assume what all kind of gossip might have happened then. So they did have to deal with some of that, but they stayed very focused, because in the home study course, and if you want to look at the talk that I did for the University of Science and Philosophy last August, I'll be sure to put a link under this video, where I talk about my own personal cosmic romance. I actually share how Walter and Leo also came together. And it's in the home study course for those of you who are coming along. I believe it's Unit 2. So they came together and they made a huge commitment. And what they decided to do is they actually took on this idea of Swannanoa. So let's pause for a moment. You've heard us mention Swannanoa many, many times. So when they went and looked, there's a wonderful story about what they did, but they ended up finding this beautiful, beautiful marble palace. It's up here off the Shenandoah Valley. If you ever decide to come visit over here at the Russell Museum in Waynesboro, Virginia. You can search for Swananoa and find out when they're open to the public, because I want to recommend to anybody to go see this magnificent place, because that's when they decided to open what they called the Institute of Man. And they brought all of the works of Walter Russell to Swananoa, and the story alone with Swananoa could take us all night long, but we don't have that luxury here today. Now, this is the power of a dream, because she had a vision of this place. She had a vision, and when they had their grand opening, there were actually 1,000 people in attendance. 1,000 people in attendance. And so at some point, I'll be able to show all the pictures of some of these things. Now, in 1950, they completed the home study course together, and it was offered for $100. Now, I want to pause for a moment, because part of what's so beautiful about this, let's talk here for just a moment, is I've seen some of the items that they typed up in the archives. So when they wrote that home study course, okay, we know how big the home study course is. They had to type it. They had no editor. They had no way to quickly copy and paste. Every single word was lovingly typed. And so I saw how when they started to combine things, they literally would take pieces of paper, and they would tape them together. Okay. And that way, that's how they came up with their manuscripts. Now, this is important because of the devotion. I mean, every single word was typewritten. Would many of us have the patience to do that now? All those pages in the home study course? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I see some of your comments. Oh, you all are so sweet. So sweet. And so when we go to this, they really started doing some things. They started doing classes at Swananoa. Okay. They had people from 13 states and international that would actually come to Swananoa and stay for a month. And for the next 50 years, Leah would market and distribute the Russell cosmogony. This was a sharp woman. So it's very interesting when you learn about her. She actually was able to preserve this work. If it wasn't for her, many people say that much of this would not have been preserved. Really, really important. Okay. So if I could ask Dee, would you do me a favor, dear? Would you take some screenshots of some of the comments? Because I don't know if we keep all of them when we leave. And I want to be sure to capture these. So I'll learn how to do this differently next time. And I don't want to lose those. I would really appreciate that, Miss Dee. Thank you. So let's go back to the timeline here. So they had all kinds of things happening. They're producing things. They actually have, here's another thing that really impressed me about these two. In 1953, this is now when Walter is a sprightly 82. Leo is 49. They wrote an open letter to the world of science. And they sent it to 350 members of the National Academy of Science and the Royal Society of London, 100 universities, and 300 papers. So, Ken, I pause for just a moment here, because what strikes me about this couple, and when I've read through so many of these letters, they absolutely believed they could change the world. You should see. Someday we'll do a broadcast on just some of the things in the archives. You should see the devotion of the letters that they would handwrite, that they would type out, and trying to tell people. They were talking about fluoride in water before anybody. They were talking about so many of the things that we're now dealing with, and they believed they could make a difference. They did not for one moment pause. And so I bring this up to us because it made me wonder, how many of us in humanity today hesitate to write a letter to the editor? How many of us would sit down and write a letter to a national academy? How many of us sometimes shy away because we don't think our voice matters? The tenacity of Leah Russell was a woman who had no qualms about the fact that they could influence the world. And remember, they were talking about things that weren't necessarily accepted then. So I'm not idolizing these two. I'm offering inspiration for these two. This is a body of work that is that their level of devotion was so touching to me. So I'll not get tied up. Oh my goodness, I could talk hours. I'm telling you, it's so much fun. Let's continue the journey, shall we? All right. So Walter republishes the home study course in 1953. That's what we're doing now. And they actually do a book, the Secret of Light. The book is given to President Eisenhower. Okay. So everywhere they went, they were giving series of lectures. Okay. Walter Russell is giving a series of lectures in the mid 1950s to people at Swannanoa. They're giving lectures at all kinds of different events and celebrations. You can just take a snapshot of that there. I mean, we'll have this up. Walter and Leo published another book, The One World Purpose. They published The World Crisis. God will work with you, but not for you. Leo published that when she was 50 years old. Walter was 84. Walter starts to draw the scientific diagram called The Science of the Future. He's then doing other scientific drawings. They revise the home study course and co-author it with Leo, and they publish The Atomic Suicide. So during these 15 years they had together, they were busy. They were busy, okay? They're drawing scientific diagrams. So they're doing all of these things. And then he paints his last painting, okay? May 18th, he's still editing a book. And on May 19th of 1963, Walter refolded at 92 years old. 92 years old. So 1963, this happened. So 1963, please remember their energy was in the world when many of us were born. I was born in 1968. You're all welcome to give me the year you're born if you want to. You don't have to. I'm bringing this up because the fact that your life and their lives have intersected energetically, there's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. And so their energetic imprint is all the way through their work. And you can absolutely draw that into your world. And the whole idea, thank you very much, Terry, the whole idea of Awaken Your Inner Genius is to inspire you to be inspired by their work. Now, we don't have to do all the things that they did, but what happened is they came together and there was this explosion of love, not only for each other, but for humanity. Can we simply drink that in? It just makes my heart just want to just explode. Okay. Your life now has intersected with them. So everything that we study is because these two people came together. There could have been such a different path. Leo could have decided not to call Walter. They could have decided not to come together. They could have not published all of these things, but here they are still changing the world today. And what's most exciting for me and why Kim Faith, why I continue to do what I do is because I believe their work is incredibly contained, incredibly pure, and can change the world. So let me keep going because there's something else. So thank you for hanging with me. I'm so delighted to see you all right here. Love, love, love. Heard about them in 2025. All right. Thank you very much, dear. There's a reason why we're all together at this moment. All right. So let me go to, for just a moment, let me go to this big one. So here's Walter. Here's Leo. Here is their world together. They were together from 1948 until 1963. 15 years. 15 years, these two lived many lifetimes. Now, this part of the story, I want you to notice that when Walter refolded, this woman continued from 1963 all the way until she refolded until 1988 for another 25 years. Okay. She refolded when she was 83 years old. For another 25 years, this woman kept his work alive. You want to talk about devotion? So first of all, can we acknowledge how heartbreaking it was for her to lose her mate? I mean, they were destined to come together. Very powerful. And for 25 years, when I built this timeline, that's what part of really touched my heart as I was thinking about, there she was in this palace all by herself. She had people helping. This is when John Bonsall and Jim Porter and Margaret Rue, they were there at the palace, what they called Swannanoa, the palace. They were having tours of people come in from all over the world. Leo was still speaking all over the world. She spent the next 25 years, longer than she was with Walter, she spent the next 25 years. Can you join me in simply expressing gratitude? That's how much she loved us. That's how much these two work is just simply. I mean, to me, I was simply thinking about the difference that we all make in life. When he refolded, by the way, okay, when he refolded, she was inching close to 62 years old. 62 years old, older than I am now. I'm a lovely 56 years young. But as we go into what it is that she was doing, this was a brave woman that said, you know what, we're not going to stop. And she took this life experience and she made it count. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Makes you wonder, how much more is there to any of us? How much more is there to discover, to expand? Whew, let's have a good time. Let's go back to the timeline, shall we? All right. So now we're going to what was happening with Lao. So at Lao, she ends up publishing this idea of it was something called a scientific and living philosophy of love and sex. She ends up making sure that they have The Secret of Light, the second edition. She publishes at 67, Why You Cannot Die, Reincarnation Explained. Okay. This is where I was showing you from 1963 to 1988. This is where Walter refolded and she continued the journey. She was 59 when he passed, by the way. So she continued for the next 25 years. All right. So Lao ended up having a mini illumination where she received the insight, this time you shall not fail, is where she felt the Creator was telling her that she needed to continue. And this is an important part of the story. All right. So let me zoom this in. This is an important part of the story. This ties into what a lot of people are asking. So right now, and remember, Walter was told never to publish again. So let me read this. So there was a re-release of the Universal One. Lao decides to publish after Dr. Russell passed due to the warning from the Catholic Church in the 1920s to never publish the book again. Dr. Russell honored that request, and Lao courageously decides to release it after he passed because the world needed to know that knowledge. Wow. That takes courage, don't you think? Courage is the word that comes to me when I'm inspired by the work that she did. Courage. So there she is. She's continuing her journey. She ends up keeping what they called it the museum back then. It was at Swannanoa. They gave lots of students tours. They were teaching. Lao continues. Sorry, my little thing there. Lao continues to write letters and influence world leaders. Books are shipped all over the world. Home study courses are bought. Attended 50,000 students are engaged with their work. And this continues. And in 1988, at 83, Lao Russell refolded. What were you doing in 1988? I had just graduated from high school. I was in college at the time. I was a sophomore in college. But in 1988, just curious, I want to take you back for just a moment. Just take you back. And I thought it would be good for you to hear another clip before I continue talking about what happened after that, because that's a part of the journey that we're on here. I thought you might enjoy this clip where Lao is talking about information and knowledge. Tune in again.
Information, but very little knowledge. That's why we wrote our home study course that is basically scientific. It's a consistent cosmogony that is teaching man God's ways and processes, not information to remember and repeat something that's been handed down for many years that is untrue, but cosmic knowledge directly from God. And God's cosmic knowledge is consistent. There is not an inconsistency in our home study course. And it's transforming lives.
Right.
Probably we have more men students than women, which I think is very wonderful, because usually it's the women that are more interested in the spiritual things than men.
All right. So tuning into the vibration of Leo, I remember it was a while before I heard her voice, and I now really have an appreciation for what both of them have done. And so I'm going to just give you a quick snapshot about what happened, and I'm going to go back here to the timeline on the wall. So when Leo refolded in 1988, the University of Science and Philosophy that they both had created, it went on for another 10 years. And so at Swannanoa, they were actually still shipping out books, and at this palace here for 10 years, they operated. And then the dollars ran out, and a decision had to be made, a very, very difficult decision. And at the start of where you see this gray box, everything was put into storage. Everything, every painting, every sculpture, every scientific drawing, every bit of the archives, it was all put into storage. And for 20 years, my new friends, and some of my seasoned friends, for 20 years it sat. And so many of the students that actually, you can talk to John and Jim and Margaret about it. So many of the students that had seen this beautiful work had watched this happen for almost 50 years. It was a heartbreaking time. And many wondered if the work would ever come back to the world. And now looking back, one of the things that came out of that Russell experience, when I had people actually map out what was happening and how their life intersected with this, people now come to call this the sacred pause. And I thought that was such a poetic way. You know, we tend to look at things as so negative sometimes. You're like, oh my goodness, I'm so sad it was in storage for 20 years. I now have a heartfelt understanding of perhaps that's how it was protected. Perhaps that's how it was protected. So 20 years pass, and then a mighty group of students came together, okay? A small group of mighty students came together, and they decided to open this museum in Waynesboro, Virginia. They got everything out of storage. They worked very hard. There's so much that I could tell you, but that's not what this one is about. But I do want you to know that they actually reopened to the public in November of 2019, only to have COVID shut the world down in March of 2020. Wow. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why is it? Why is it that all that happened? And so then fast forward, and we're still where we are today here at 2025. Now, when I walked in almost 4 years ago, I was so touched by the beauty of the museum, but they were struggling. And so when you hear us talk about all of the different fundraising that we do, philosophy.org takes certainly donations. When you hear what we do, I myself have contributed a great deal just to try to keep the doors open, because I believe that this work is incredibly important for the world to know. So that gives you just a quick snapshot of where they are. And let me go back here to the document. There's a lot that happened, and do know, please, that I'm going to end up putting this up, that there's all kinds of, Matt Presti ended up helping to open the museum. Do know that this concept of a solar flare, there were some mini solar flares in 2012. We've talked about that. Some people are saying that might be coming in 2021. There was conversation between me and some others that were familiar with the work that there possibly were solar flares back even in 1921. Was that perhaps why Walter Russell had a deeper illumination? Who knows? Many of us, I believe now, are going to have access to more and more of what's over there. So on the other side of the veil. So what's happening now is that all kinds of things are happening with the university, and they're certainly trying to we came in, that's when I came in. We did the first Russell experience in April of 2022. We did our second Russell experience in November of 2022. And then we did our third Russell experience. There was a cosmic messenger that the philosophy.org has. That's where they start having groups. You can get together with other students. And then we had another one, and we had another January 3rd in 2023. We had our third Russell experience. And in 2023, also, another volunteer came and actually launched the science discussion group. So here we are on a whole nother level of what's happening with the home study course with the University of Science and Philosophy. And so I want to come back to this idea of resiliency and the beauty of imperfection. You know, kintsugi bowl is what it's called. And when you look at a kintsugi bowl, actually the beauty is in how they soldered the broken pieces together. And so it's important for us not to idolize Walter and Lao Russell. It's important for us to understand that they too had broken pieces in their life. They had broken marriages. They had loss of family, of death. They faced financial difficulties. There's a lot of stories about how they really struggled to keep all of this open at Swannanoa, yet their light continued to do that. And here we are all these years later. So I'm curious. I'm curious about your life. Is it possible that the pieces that have been in your life, that it might make a more beautiful bowl yourself? And so I have this sitting in my living room because I've struggled over the years. That was part of when I walked in here. I had been just kicked out of the previous family because of my work and trying to stop child trafficking. My heart was broken. I was looking for meaning and purpose in a world that did not necessarily understand unconditional love. And I walked in, and this place was incredibly healing for me. And that's my devotion. That's why I'm here. And so that was a lot of talking here for the past 75 minutes. I'm not going to make this go any longer than it needs to go. I do want you to know that we'll end up putting a link at some point where you can access this timeline yourself. I would encourage you to make your own timeline. Go get yourself a blank piece of paper, draw a line, and put your life on one page. Tape together a few pages if you need a longer one. And then take a look at your life, because here's what's really, really interesting. When you look at this, look at how, if we were to draw a wave pattern, ups and downs and ups and downs and ups. In the wave lies the secret of creation. That's what the message is. And so I want to say a gracious thank you to you all that have listened here. I see a few of the comments now. Such a great timeline. You worked a lot and with a lot of love. I did, dear. I poured my heart into this. Others have just said a lot of other things that are there. And please let me know right quick before we wrap up. What are you taking away tonight? Are you taking away a greater understanding of the fact that Walter and Lao also lived this human journey like us? Are you going to consider possibly doing a timeline for yourself? I'd love to see, now that I'm close by, what are you taking away for yourself? What are you taking away for yourself? Because that's what matters. You see, if Walter and Lao were here today, that's what they would really tie into what it is that you're doing with all of this. And so I'm curious, what are you taking away for yourself? So are you going to commit to go do a timeline for yourself? Is it going to give you perspective to say, wow, there's something, maybe all the ups and downs from my life are actually quite poetic? So I'm curious, before we wrap up here, I'd like you just to put there, never stop doing your passion. That's what Miss Karen says. Karen Elkins was excited for what it is that I was doing. And Terry, you are most welcome, dear, but I have to tell you, it is more of an honor for me to just be part of the work. You know, always follow our heart. And when I walked into this place, my heart was broken. I'll be perfectly honest with you all. I was so closed down because I was so stunned by all the things I'd learned about child trafficking in the world, by learning that the world wasn't quite what I thought. And I was having difficulty holding on to hope. And for me, hope has always been an acronym for harness our power every day. And so when I came in here and I found it to be so healing, and when I walked in and I saw in some of the scientific drawings things that I had been seeing my whole life from the time that I was a child, I knew that there was something very special here. And so perhaps it was supposed to be closed for all those years. Perhaps there is a reason that now, at the cusp of the awakening of humanity, that we are meant to be here at this moment and learning. And so I want to say a thank you to all of you. You give me the honor of being able to do these things, to give voice to it. These were all experiments. I didn't know whether they would work or not. I hope someday that we'll have enough donors. I'm taking away from tonight, they were great seekers, wonderful teachers. Very much, Margie, I appreciate that. Deb says, desire and passion are essential as they fuel our dreams and achieve our goals. I absolutely love that. I love that. Part of why, I came to them to do the Russell experience, and I hope someday to find sponsors. My goal always was when we talked with the team is to do these 2 and 3 day programs here to get people from all over the world to come experience it and then go out and spread that light. So I see Soul Paradise says, I will do my timeline. Woo-hoo! I'll take that out. That work can change the world. So it's important to be brave and courageous. Oh, I love that. To be who we are and take action towards giving form to our dreams. That's what it is an idea. They were excellent at manifesting an idea. And I know for myself, I haven't been always very good at that in my life. I would have lots of ideas and I wasn't very good sometimes at bringing it to action. And they inspire me to keep doing that. And our last story I'll share with you. I have the beautiful opportunity for a lot of people to come into the museum, and on the days that I get to volunteer, I'm a volunteer. They call me an ambassador, but I have no other official title of any kind. I'm simply a volunteer, an ambassador of what they do here. And I will hear people come in and share stories about when they met Leo all those years ago. And people remember this. And every single story had a very similar stream to it. Leo was very much in tune with their personal essence, and she followed up every single conversation with a personal letter. And people talk about how they kept those letters for years. And she made people feel very heard. Wouldn't it be powerful if each of us could help people feel heard? Maybe it's taking an extra few minutes when we bump into somebody at the grocery store. I was even at the post office the other day, at a small post office, and I could tell that the woman working there was troubled, and there was no one else in the room, and I took the time to have a conversation with her. Perhaps we can all take away, what I take away is that we can make a lot of people feel heard. The more we rise in consciousness, the more we're going to tune into what's going on with another. Miss Judy says, for the past year, I've been trying to piece together my 71-year life journey. How I found me. Miss Judy, this will be incredibly powerful for you. Our job here, our privilege is to walk through the world and love unconditionally, no matter what other people say. And so I came in with gusto. They joke with me around here that I landed here at the museum like a comet. I wasn't sure that was a good or bad thing the first time I heard them say that, but what it means is that it was bam, that there was an impact. And I've had all kinds of people in my life accuse me of so many things. You're doing things for your own agenda. You're trying to take over. You're too passionate. You're too excited. I have been told I am too something for my entire life. Can anyone relate to that? And what was so intriguing to me is that I simply came here and I found a place that I wanted to pour unconditional love. I had no agenda. I wanted nothing. I wanted nothing except to share with others the love and healing that I knew that was contained within this work. You can energetically feel it within this work. This reality really has a hard time with unconditional love. And what's so intriguing about it all, my dear ones, is that we're actually, our divine birthright is unconditional love. When we have that love container that is just so radiating, it is so powerful, and just walking through the world will change the world. And so I invite us all, as we leave here today, looking at this timeline, is to know that our life is also a beautiful tapestry. And that may we begin to realize that when we're putting together the broken pottery pieces of our life, that it is in the ceiling of all those broken pieces, that's the beauty. Because I've asked myself several times, would I want this same piece of pottery without the gold? And as much as I hate to admit it, the answer is no. The answer is no. So may we all realize that they made something very beautiful from their human journey, and we can as well. Okay. So, dear ones, that is my story here this evening. I want to say a gracious thank you for joining us for our first Extra Tuesday night. Next Tuesday, now remember, we'll be back this coming Sunday starting Unit 10. And remember that we're going into the science of the cosmos. So get ready for that and just simply come in with your open heart. Remember, it's the vibration that's with the frequency. It's the love that's being poured into all of this. So even if you don't quite have the bandwidth to understand all the science, simply stick with us because it's inching us towards Unit 12, which is my favorite unit out of the entire home study course. I cannot wait. Next Tuesday night, okay, you'll still see us every Sunday night. Next Tuesday night, we're going to have John Bonzel doing a very informal session like I did here. And we're going to have him be talking about the audio lectures from Walter and the things that he listens to and what he takes away. So I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm going to say until next time, dear ones, I love you. And I thank you so much for the joy of being with me tonight. Until next time, see you on Sunday.